Nathan had expected cold metal hallways and harsh white lights. That was what every military report said about alien warships. Hard surfaces, no warmth, no beauty. The reports were wrong. The inside of the Valanthari mothership looked like someone had grown a cathedral out of living light. The walls breathed with soft color, shifting between deep purple and pale gold in slow, rolling waves. The floor under his boots was smooth and warm, not metal but something almost like polished stone, and he could feel a faint pulse running through it, like a heartbeat far below. The air was clean and thick, with that strange smell of rain and earth, and the silence was not empty but full, like the hush inside a forest. 4 Valanthari guards were waiting for him. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with long limbs and narrow faces. Their skin was a deep blue-gray that shifted shade depending on the angle of the light. Their eyes were large and dark, flecked with tiny points of silver, like chips of starlight, pressed into black glass. They wore armor that seemed to grow out of their skin, rather than sit on top of it. Layered plates of something organic, that moved when they moved. They said nothing. They simply turned and walked, and Nathan followed. They led him through corridors that curved and branched, like the inside of a living thing. He passed through galleries with high ceilings, where floating lights drifted like slow fireflies. He crossed narrow bridges over deep shafts filled with a soft blue glow. He walked through halls lined with things that were not decorations, but living creatures, plants and organisms fused into the walls, breathing and pulsing in time with the ship. Everything was alive. The ship was not built. It was grown. After what felt like 20 minutes of walking, they reached a set of massive doors. The doors opened without a sound, and Nathan stepped through into a space so large it took his breath away. It was an amphitheater, round and vast, with rows of tiered seats rising on every side. Thousands of Valanthari sat in those seats, silent and still, their silver-flecked eyes all turned toward the center. Above them, the ceiling was a transparent dome, and through it, Nathan could see the stars, bright and sharp and endless, as if the whole room was open to space. At the far end, raised on a platform that seemed to float above a pool of shimmering liquid light, was a throne. And on the throne sat the queen. She was taller than the others. Her skin was deep indigo, so dark it seemed to drink in light and give it back as a faint glow. Her eyes were large and golden, the color of warm amber, and they found Nathan the moment he stepped through the doors. She wore no crown, no jewels, no ornament of any kind. Every other being in the room leaned toward her the way plants lean toward the sun. Her authority was not in what she wore. It was in what she was. Nathan walked the full length of the amphitheater. He felt every step. Thousands of alien eyes watched him, and the silence pressed against his skin like deep water. His heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. His training told him to look for exits, count the guards, measure the distance to the nearest wall. But something deeper told him to just walk, to breathe, to keep his eyes on her and not look away. He stopped at the base of the platform. The protocol file had said to bow. Every envoy before him had bowed. Nathan did not bow. He stood straight, looked up at the alien queen, and spoke. "My name is Nathan Cole. You asked for someone who wouldn't kneel." Standing. The silence after his words was so complete that he could hear the blood moving in his own veins. Then the queen spoke. Her voice was unlike anything he had ever heard. It was layered, 3 tones at once, one deep, one middle, one high and almost musical, blending together into something that was more felt than heard. She spoke in perfect English, but with a rhythm that made every sentence sound like it had weight and meaning beyond the words. "Nathan Cole, we have watched your kind for a long time. We have seen you fight and bleed and die, and still reach for stars you cannot name. We asked for someone who would not kneel, because we are tired of those who do. The ones who kneel say what they think we want to hear. We do not want what we want what is true. She paused and studied him. Those golden eyes moved across his face, as if she was reading a language written on his skin. I will offer you something no human has ever been offered, she said. One wish. Anything within my power. And my power is great. Peace for your people. Weapons beyond your understanding. A new world, green and untouched. The end of your enemies. Power to rule your own kind. Anything, Nathan Cole. She leaned forward, just slightly. Choose carefully. What you wish for will tell me everything I need to know about your species. Nathan felt the weight of it hit him like a wall. This was the test. This was why every envoy before him had broken. This was the trap, the impossible choice. Every answer felt wrong. If he asked for peace, she might see it as weakness. If he asked for weapons, she would see humans as killers. If he asked for territory, she would see them as greedy. Every option was a mirror, and she was watching to see what it reflected. He closed his eyes. He thought about his mother humming in her garden. He thought about Danny and his bad coffee. He thought about Captain Beckett, who had buried her son and kept going. He thought about every ship that had gone silent, every colony that had burned, every child who had grown up afraid of the sky. And then he opened his eyes and looked at her. Not at the queen, not at the throne, at her. He saw it, the tiny tightness in her jaw, the way her fingers pressed a little too hard against the armrest, the slight lean forward that was not command, but hope. She was not testing him out of cruelty. She was searching. She had asked this question before, many times, and every answer had disappointed her. She was not a conqueror sitting on a throne. She was a person who had been alone for a very long time. I choose you, Nathan said. The room moved, not with sound, but with motion. Every Velenthari in the amphitheater shifted, turned, looked at their neighbor. The guards stiffened. The air itself seemed to vibrate, a low hum that Nathan felt at his teeth. The queen did not move. She stared at him, and her face was impossible to read. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. Then slowly, like the first light of morning breaking over a frozen horizon, she smiled. It was not a human smile. Her mouth was shaped differently. Her features were alien in every way. But the meaning was the same across any species, any world, any language. It was warmth. It was surprise. It was something deeper than either. Something that had been locked away for a long time, and was now, carefully, being let out. No one, she said, and her layered voice was soft, almost a whisper, has ever chosen me. The silence that followed was not the heavy testing silence of before. It was something else. It was the silence of a door opening, the silence of something beginning. Nathan Cole, standing at the foot of an alien throne with the stars above him and the eyes of thousands upon him, did not look away from her face, and she did not look away from his. Neither of them knew it yet, but in that single moment, the war had already begun to end. In the days that followed, Nathan Cole learned 3 things very quickly. First, the queen's name was Salith Aranvale, though her people simply called her the Aranvale, a title that meant something between the heart of all and she who holds the silence. Second, she was far more dangerous than any weapon her people had ever built. And third, she was also the kindest person he had ever met. She dismissed her guards on the first day. This clearly shocked them. They stood frozen for several long seconds before turning and leaving, their silver-flecked eyes full of doubt. When they were gone, Salith looked at Nathan and said, "They think you are dangerous." "Am I?" he asked. "Very much so," she said, and there was a warmth in her layered voice that made his chest feel tight in a way he did not fully understand. Not the parts that visitors were meant to see, not the grand halls and ceremonial chambers, but the real ship, the living ship. She showed him the Velanceer, the biological core at the center of the vessel, a massive pulsing organism that served as both engine and brain. It had been growing for over 6,000 years. It was not a machine. It was alive, and it was aware, and it remembered everything. She showed him the nurseries. They were the most beautiful and the most terrible rooms Nathan had ever entered. Hundreds of young Velanthari floated in pods of warm, glowing liquid, their tiny bodies curled tight, their minds already linked to the ship. They looked fragile and perfect, like something too precious to exist in a universe that had war in it. "This is why we fight," Salith said quietly, standing beside him as he looked at the pods. "Not for territory, not for power, for them." And then she told him the truth that no human had ever been told. The truth that changed everything. The Velanthari had not started the war. They had not attacked humanity out of aggression or hunger or hate. They were a species that had evolved in the deep oceans of a world with no land, creatures born in darkness and pressure, who communicated through vibration and resonance. Their entire civilization was built on connection, on the belief that all living things were part of one song, one great vibration that held the universe together. When they reached the stars, they had searched for other voices in the song. Instead, they found species that lied, that conquered, that used other living things as tools. And then they found humanity. "We watched your people for centuries," Sylith said. They were standing by a viewport that looked out on a binary star system, two suns circling each other in a slow, endless dance. "We saw your wars and your cruelty, yes, but we also saw your music, your kindness, the way your mothers hold their children, the way you plant gardens in dead soil and sing songs to people you will never meet. We could not decide what you were." Then humanity's expansion fleets had pushed into a region of space the Velanthari called the Quiet Garden, the breeding grounds where their young were grown in massive organic structures that drifted through the void. The humans did not know what those structures were. They looked like resources, like biological material ripe for harvesting, so they harvested them. "Your people did not know," Salith said, and her voice was steady, but her golden eyes were not. "It was not cruelty, it was ignorance, but our children were dying. We tried to send signals, tried to warn you, but your people read our transmissions as threats. Your warships fired first, and so the war began. The way wars always begin, because neither side could hear the other." Nathan felt sick. 11 years of war, millions dead on both sides, and it had started because humans had accidentally killed alien children, and then shot at the parents who tried to stop them. "Why didn't you tell the envoys this?" he asked. "Why didn't you tell them the truth?" "I did," Salith said. "Every one of them. And every one of them wished for weapons, for territory, for advantage. They heard the truth, and they used it to calculate what they could take from us. Not one of them said they were sorry. Not one of them asked about the children." She turned to face him, and in the light of the twin suns, her skin glowed like the deep ocean at night. "That is why I kept searching, Nathan. That is why I offered the wish. I was not testing humanity. I was fighting for it. Against my own people, against my own war council, against 11 years of evidence that said your species could not be reached. I held back our greatest weapon, a device that can unmake a planet at the molecular level, because I believed, I hoped, that somewhere among your people there was one person who would see me. Not a queen, not a threat, me." "And I chose you," Nathan said. "Yes," she said softly, "you did." They stood in silence for a while, watching the twin suns turn around each other. "I'm sorry," Nathan said at last, "for what we did. For the children. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." Salith looked at him. Her eyes brightened, the bioluminescent patterns in her irises shifting to something warm and liquid. And Nathan was beginning to understand that this was how her people showed deep emotion. "That," she said, "is the first time a human has said those words to me." Over the weeks that followed, Nathan and Salith built something together that neither of their peoples had thought possible. A real framework for peace, not a treaty full of legal words designed to be twisted and broken, but a living agreement based on the Velanthari concept of resonance. Each side would send a representative to live within the other's civilization. Not a hostage, not a spy, a bridge, a person who would learn, listen, and translate, not just language, but meaning, intent, feeling. Nathan sent coded messages back to the horizon's edge. Captain Beckett received them with deep suspicion, but she passed them on to the Earth Council. The council was divided. Some called it a miracle, others called it a trap. But Nathan was not thinking about politics. He was thinking about the way Salith's voice softened when she spoke about her people's music. He was thinking about the way she listened when he told her about his mother's garden. Really listened, with her whole body leaning toward him as if his words were a song she had been waiting to hear. He was thinking about the look on her face when he described how humans sang lullabies to their babies, and how she had closed her eyes and said, "We do the same. We have always done the same." One evening, they stood together on the highest observation platform of the mothership. The stars were so thick above them that the darkness between them seemed thin, like black cloth worn through with light. "I need to ask you something," Nathan said, "and I need the truth." "I have never lied to you, Nathan Cole." "If Earth rejects the peace, what happens?" Salith was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was flat and careful, the way a person speaks when they are trying very hard not to feel what they are saying. "My War Council will take it as proof that humans cannot change. They will use the deep resonance weapon. Earth will be destroyed. Every human colony will follow. Your species will end." Nathan's blood went cold. "What will you do?" She looked at him with those golden eyes, and for the first time, he saw something in them that he recognized completely. It was the look of a person who had been carrying a weight so heavy and for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. "I will have failed," she said simply, "and I will have to live with that." Nathan reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were longer than his, cooler and smoother, but they wrapped around his with a gentleness that surprised him. She did not pull away. She held on. "Then we won't fail," he said. She looked down at their joined hands, and then up at his face, and she smiled again. That same, slow, warm, impossible smile. "No," she said. The peace framework arrived on Earth on a Tuesday morning. 200 delegates of the United Earth Council sat in the Great Hall in Geneva and read it in complete silence. Some of them read it twice. A few read it 3 times, sure they had missed the hidden trap. There was no trap. The terms were simple. Humanity would formally acknowledge that it had unknowingly harmed Velanthari young during its expansion into the Quiet Garden. Both sides would establish permanent cultural exchange stations, staffed by humans and Velanthari living together. And one human would remain aboard the Velanthari mothership as a permanent bridge between the two peoples. That human would be Nathan Cole, at his own request. There were no demands for surrender, no call for disarmament, no territorial claims. It was the most generous peace offer in the history of interstellar contact, and it split the council right down the middle. The loudest voice against it belonged to Admiral Gregory Hale. He was a big man with a thick neck, and a voice that sounded like stones grinding together. He had spent 30 years in the fleet, and had built his entire reputation on fighting the Velanthari. He hated them, not as a strategy, not as a political position. He hated them in his bones, in his blood, in the place where his heart used to be soft. The Velanthari had destroyed a transport ship carrying his 2 daughters during the Battle of Kepler Station. They were 9 and 12 years old. He had never recovered. His grief had turned to stone, and the stone had become his whole world. He stood before the council with his fist on the table and his jaw tight. This is a surrender wrapped in pretty words. Cole has been compromised. The alien queen has gotten inside his head, and now she is using him to drop our guard before the killing blow. I have buried my children because of these creatures. Do not ask me to trust them. Captain Beckett was there too, given a seat as Nathan's commanding officer. She stood when Hale finished, and spoke in a voice that was quiet, but carried to every corner of the hall. Admiral, I lost my son to this war. I know what it costs. But Nathan Cole has sent us verified intelligence from inside that ship. The Velanthari have had a weapon capable of destroying Earth for over a decade. They have never used it. The Queen herself has been holding her own military back, at great personal risk, because she believed we were worth saving. That is not the behavior of an enemy planning an attack. That is the behavior of someone begging us to be better than we have been. Hale shook his head. You are a fool, Beckett. But I would rather be a fool who tried for peace than a wise woman who chose extinction. The debate went on for 3 days. 3 days of shouting, arguing, and backroom deals. 3 days of humanity deciding its own future, while the clock ticked toward a deadline nobody wanted to think about. Meanwhile, aboard the mothership, Nathan was facing the same war from the other side. Salith's War Council was made up of 12 senior commanders, the most powerful military leaders in the Velanthari Dominion. They had been fighting humans for 11 years. They had lost soldiers, ships, and entire breeding colonies. And now their queen was offering the enemy peace without punishment. They were furious. The loudest among them was Commander Theron Vel. He was old by Velanthari standards, his blue-gray skin marked with deep scars from close combat with human soldiers. He had fought in the worst battles of the war, and carried the memory of every one. He stood before the council, and spoke in the formal harmonic tones of Velanthari command address. And though Nathan could not understand the words, he could feel their weight in the vibrations that shook the air. Salith translated in a low murmur beside him. He says I have been seduced by a human, that my judgment is broken, that the wish was a sacred ritual, and I allowed a primitive species to twist it for political gain. Nathan looked at her. Is he wrong about your judgment? Salith met his eyes. My judgment has told me, for 11 years, to hold back a weapon that could end this war in a single day. My judgment has cost me allies, credibility, and the trust of my own commanders. My judgment told me to keep sending for envoys when every one of them failed. And my judgment told me, when you said those 2 words, that I was right to wait. She paused. If that is broken judgment, then I do not want it fixed. The War Council called for a vote. Under Velanthari law, if a majority voted against the peace framework, the Queen was required to accept their decision. The deep resonance weapon would be activated. Earth would be destroyed. The war would end in the worst way possible. Salith stood before the 12 commanders and spoke. She spoke for over an hour. Nathan sat and listened, unable to understand the words, but able to feel every one of them. Her voice filled the chamber with harmonics that vibrated in his chest, in his throat, in the space behind his eyes. She spoke of history, of principle, of the ancient Velanthari belief that all life was one song, and that to silence another voice was to wound the song forever. When she finished, Commander Theron Vel stood and gave his response. It was short. Salith translated it with a flat voice. The humans did not hear our song when they killed our children. Why should we hear theirs? The vote was 6-6. A tie. Under Velanthari law, A tie could only be broken by the queen herself, but at a price. If she cast the deciding vote, and the decision later proved wrong, she would be removed from the throne, exiled from her people, and her name would be erased from the memory halls forever. She would become nothing, as if she had never existed. Salith did not hesitate. She did not pause. She did not look at Nathan for reassurance or guidance. She stood tall, her indigo skin glowing in the dim light of the council chamber, and she cast her vote for peace. On Earth, the council vote was just as close. Admiral Hale had gathered enough support to force a deadlock. The delegates argued in circles, neither side willing to give ground. It was Captain Beckett who broke it. She removed the rank insignia from her collar, the small metal pins she had worn for 30 years, and she placed them on the table in front of her. "I have given my entire adult life to this war," she said. "I have nothing left to give except my word. Nathan Cole is the finest officer I have ever served with. He is telling us that an alien queen has spent 11 years protecting humanity from her own people. If we cannot meet that with even a small amount of trust, then we do not deserve to survive this war." The hall was silent. The final vote was 112 in favor, 88 against. Peace won by 24 votes, 24 votes between survival and destruction. When the message reached Nathan aboard the mothership, he was standing with Salith in the memory hall. The crystalline structures around them hummed softly, holding the recorded lives of millions of Velanthari, stretching back thousands of years. He read the message on his comm unit, and his hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. "They said yes," he told her. Salith turned to him. The light from the crystals played across her face, and for the second time since he had known her, she smiled. It was wider this time, deeper, and it reached her golden eyes in a way that made them glow like small suns. She reached out and took his hand, the way she had done on the observation platform days before. Her fingers closed around his, long and cool and steady. "Then we begin," she said. Nathan held her hand and looked around the memory hall, at the thousands of years of life stored in light and crystal around them. Somewhere in this hall, he thought, there would one day be a crystal for this moment, for the day two people from opposite ends of the galaxy decided that the war was over. Not because one side won, but because both sides finally chose to listen. 5 years passed, and the galaxy changed in ways nobody had thought possible. The cultural exchange stations, called resonance stations, were built on 12 worlds scattered across the border between human and Velanthari space. Each station was home to both species, living under the same roof, eating in the same halls, working side by side every single day. It was messy, it was loud, it was often confusing, frustrating, and awkward. And it was the most important thing either civilization had ever done. Nathan Cole became the first permanent human ambassador to the Velanthari Dominion. He lived aboard the mothership, learned to speak Velanthari with a fluency that surprised even the oldest scholars, and served as the person everyone called when something went wrong between the two species. And things went wrong often. Humans were loud. They argued. They laughed at strange times. They slammed doors and raised their voices and made sudden movements that startled everyone around them. The Velanthari were the opposite. They were slow, careful, and deeply sensitive to the emotions of others. They could feel what the people around them were feeling, not as a guess, but as a physical sensation, like temperature or pressure. The first time a human engineer lost his temper on Resonance Station 3, every Velanthari within 100 meters felt his anger hit them like a wave of heat. 2 of them had to leave the room. It took Nathan 3 days of careful conversation to fix that one. But for every problem, there was something good, something unexpected, something that made Nathan believe the whole thing was worth it. A human nurse named Katie Price was stationed on Resonance 4. She was a small, freckled woman from a town in Ohio that no one outside of Ohio had ever heard of. She had joined the fleet because she wanted to help people, and she had ended up on an alien space station watching over Valenthari infants in the nursery ward. One night, a Valenthari baby would not stop crying. Nothing the Valenthari nurses did could calm it. Katie, out of habit and instinct, picked the baby up and started humming a lullaby her grandmother used to sing. The baby went quiet within seconds. It turned out that the vibrations of a human hum were almost identical to the calming frequencies that Valenthari mothers produced for their young. After that, Katie became the most popular person on the station. Valenthari parents started requesting her by name. Danny Marsh, Nathan's old friend from the Horizon's Edge, transferred to Resonance Station 7. He became famous among the Valenthari for his terrible jokes. When translated into Valenthari harmonic language, his punchlines produced sound patterns that the aliens found deeply and inexplicably funny. Nobody could explain why, not even the Valenthari linguists. Danny just shrugged and kept telling jokes. He married a human botanist named Claire Whitfield, who had come to the station to study Valenthari plant life, and together they grew the first garden that combined earth vegetables with Valenthari bioluminescent flowers. Tomatoes growing next to plants that glowed in the dark. Danny said it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. After Claire, Commander Theron Vell, the scarred warrior who had fought hardest against the peace, was assigned to Resonance Station 1 as a military advisor. He treated it as punishment. He treated the humans as enemies he was forced to tolerate. He spoke to no one unless duty required it. His human counterpart was a combat medic named Ben Sawyer. Ben had lost his left leg below the knee in a Valenthari ambush 4 years earlier. He walked with a prosthetic and a slight limp, and a cheerful stubbornness that refused to acknowledge bad moods, his own or anyone else's. He was assigned to work directly with Theron, and for the first month, Theron would not even look at him. Ben did not push. He did not argue. He simply showed up every day, did his work, and left a cup of Valenthari herbal tea on Theron's desk each morning. It took 6 weeks before Theron drank one. It took 3 months before he nodded at Ben in greeting. It took 6 months before they shared a meal. And it took a full year before Theron Vell stood in front of a joint assembly of humans and Valenthari and said, in careful, accented English, "This war was a wound made by blindness on both sides. I was blind longer than most. I am sorry." Ben Sawyer stood beside him when he said it. And when Theron's voice broke on the last word, Ben put a hand on his shoulder and held it there until the old warrior could speak again. Captain Beckett retired from active service and was made the first director of the Resonance Initiative. She oversaw the expansion of the exchange program with the same sharp focus she had brought to commanding warships. She never fully relaxed around the Valenthari. Old habits, she said, were stubborn things. But she trusted Nathan, and that was enough. On the 3rd anniversary of the peace, she sent Nathan a private message. It said, "Your mother would be proud. So am I." Admiral Hale never accepted the peace. He resigned his commission and spent his remaining years writing warnings about Valenthari betrayal. He died 3 years after the accord, alone in a small apartment on Earth. Nathan, who held no anger toward the man, attended his funeral. He understood that Hale's hatred was not evil. It was grief that had nowhere to go. He hoped that wherever Hale was now, he had found his daughters again. And then there was Nathan and Salith. What they had was not a romance in the way humans usually meant the word. They were too different for that, in body, in biology, in the basic architecture of how they experienced the world. But what they had was deeper than romance. The Valenthari called it Vel resonance, the state in which two beings vibrate in such perfect harmony that they become in some way part of each other. It was the highest form of connection in Velanthari culture. It had never happened between two different species before. Nathan and Salith were the first. He learned to feel her moods through tiny shifts in the air around her. She learned to read his face with an accuracy that amazed even Danny. They built a language between them that was part English, part Velanthari, part gesture, and part silence. A private language that let them say more in a single look than most people could say in an hour. It was not easy. There were days when the distance between them felt too wide, when Nathan missed the simple comfort of a human conversation, and Salith retreated into the cold formality of her crown. There were people on both sides who called them traitors. There were moments of doubt and exhaustion and quiet sadness for the lives that had been lost in a war that should never have happened. But they held on, together, the way they had from the very beginning. On the 5th anniversary of the peace, a ceremony was held aboard the mothership. It was broadcast to every human colony and every Velanthari vessel at the same time, the largest shared audience in the history of either species. Thousands of beings, human and Velanthari, stood together under the great dome of stars. Salith spoke first. She spoke in both languages, her layered voice filling the vast chamber. 5 years ago, I offered a wish to a man I had never met. I expected him to wish for power, or safety, or knowledge. Instead, he chose me. Not a queen, not a crown, me. He taught me that the bravest thing any being can do is reach across the silence between worlds and say 3 simple words. I see you. Nathan stepped forward. He was older now. There was gray in his hair and lines on his face that had not been there 5 years ago. But his voice was steady, the way it had always been. I'm not a poet, he said. I'm not even a good diplomat. I'm a farm kid from Titan who got lucky. But I have learned something in the last 5 years that I think matters more than any treaty or technology. He looked out at the crowd. He saw Danny grinning in the 3rd row. He saw Beckett standing at the back with her arms folded and her eyes bright. He saw Theron Vell and Ben Sawyer sitting side by side. He saw Katie Price holding a sleeping Velanthari infant against her shoulder. The universe is big enough for all of us. Not just to survive in, to live in, together. All it takes is one moment of choosing connection instead of fear. One moment of looking at someone completely different from you and saying, I don't understand you yet, but I want to. He turned to Salith and took her hand. 5 years ago, that gesture would have caused a crisis. Now it drew a warm ripple of harmonic sound from the Velanthari in the crowd. Their version of applause. She asked me what I wished for, Nathan said, quieter now, speaking to her, but heard by billions. The truth is, I didn't know. I just saw the most powerful person I had ever met, and I could tell she was also the loneliest. And I thought, if I can be the one who makes her less alone, then maybe that's worth more than anything else in the galaxy. Salith smiled. That same slow, warm, world-changing smile she had given him on the first day. The crowd erupted, humans cheering and Velanthari singing in deep harmonics that shook the air. The mothership's living walls pulsed with light in response, as if the ship itself was celebrating. And somewhere deep in the memory halls, a new crystal began to grow. It would hold this moment forever, this bridge between two species. This impossible story that had started with a war and ended with a hand reaching across the dark. The first line of the crystal's record, translated from Velanthari, read, It began with a wish, and it changed everything. The war had been going on for 11 years. Humans and the Velanthari had been killing each other across dozens of star systems, and nobody remembered exactly how it started anymore. The colonies were burning. The fleets were falling apart. People back on Earth were tired, scared, and running out of hope. The United Earth Council had sent 7 diplomats to the Velanthari mothership over the years. Every single one came back alive, but broken. They refused to talk about what happened inside that ship. They just sat in their rooms and stared at walls. Whatever they saw in there, whatever was said to them, it hollowed them out like empty shells. Then one day, the Valenthari sent a message. Not a threat, not a demand, just one line. Send us the one who will not kneel. Every computer system, every psychological profile, every military record was scanned, and every single result pointed to the same man. His name was Nathan Cole. He was 34 years old, a lieutenant commander aboard the deep space carrier Horizon's Edge. He was not a diplomat. He was not a politician. He was a tactical officer, a quiet man who had grown up on a farming settlement on Titan. His mother, Linda Cole, had raised him alone after his father was killed in the very first Valenthari attack. Nathan had no money, no connections, no famous family name. What he had was a record that no other human could match. He had survived 7 direct engagements with the Valenthari. 7 times he had faced them in battle, and 7 times he had walked away alive. No one else in the entire human military could say that. He did not volunteer for this mission. He was ordered. Captain Laura Beckett called him into her quarters on the Horizon's Edge. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with sharp features and tired eyes. She had lost her own son in the siege of Proxima Colony 2 years ago, and the grief had turned her hard but fair. She handed Nathan a thin data file and sat back in her chair. They asked for someone who won't kneel, Cole. That's you. Nathan looked at the file. It was almost empty. No briefing on Valenthari customs. No list of demands. No strategy. Just coordinates and a launch time. I'm not a negotiator, Captain, he said. I know. That might be why they want you. And if they kill me? Beckett didn't blink. Then we know peace is impossible, and we throw everything we have left into one final fight. Either way, your trip gives us an answer. Nathan spent his last night on the ship, sitting in the observation lounge. The stars drifted by slowly on the other side of the glass, cold and endless. His friend, Corporal Danny Marsh, showed up around midnight with 2 cups of bad coffee. Danny was a short, thick-necked man with a loud laugh and a good heart. He sat down across from Nathan and said nothing for almost an hour. Finally, Danny broke the silence. You scared? Yeah, Nathan said. Terrified. Good. Scared people pay attention. It's the brave ones who get themselves killed. Nathan almost smiled. That's not exactly comforting, Danny. Wasn't trying to comfort you. I'm trying to keep you alive. Danny leaned forward and tapped the table with his finger. Listen to me. Whatever they say in there, whatever they show you, whatever they offer you, just remember one thing. You're Nathan Cole. You grew tomatoes on Titan. You survived 7 fights that should have killed you. You don't kneel because you don't know how. That's not a weakness. That's the whole point. Nathan looked at his friend for a long moment, then nodded. Thanks, Danny. Don't thank me. Just come back. The next morning, Nathan climbed into a small, stripped-down shuttle. It had no weapons, no shields, no escort. It was just a metal box with an engine and a seat. The designation painted on the side read Envoy 7. 7 envoys, 7 failures. Nathan tried not to think about that number too hard. The shuttle launched from the Horizon's Edge and moved into open space. Behind him, the carrier shrank until it was just a bright dot, and then it was gone. Ahead of him, the Valenthari mothership waited. He had seen pictures of it. Everyone had. But pictures did not prepare him for the real thing. The mothership was not just big. It was so massive that it blocked out the stars behind it. It hung in space like a dark wound, a shape that was not quite a ship and not quite alive, but something in between. Its surface moved, slowly, like the skin of something breathing. Faint lights pulsed across it in patterns that looked almost like a heartbeat. Nathan's shuttle shook, as an invisible force took hold of it, pulling it toward the ship. He had no control. He was being drawn in like a fish on a line. The docking bay opened like a mouth, and the shuttle slid inside. The doors closed behind him, cutting off the last of the starlight. Nathan sat in the dark for a moment, listening to the hum of the alien ship all around him. It was everywhere, that sound, low and deep, vibrating through the metal of his shuttle, through the seat, through his bones. He thought about his mother. He thought about her small garden on Titan, the way she used to hum while she worked, the way she would look up at the sky and say, "There's room up there for everyone, Nathan. We just haven't learned to share yet." He took one long, slow breath. He unbuckled his harness. He stood up. The shuttle door opened, and warm air rushed in. It smelled like rain on dry earth, like something ancient and clean. Light pulsed softly from the walls of the chamber beyond, shifting between purple, gold, and blue. Nathan Cole stepped out of the shuttle and onto the alien ship. Somewhere deep inside the mothership, the Queen was waiting. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know what she looked like, what she wanted, or why she had asked for him. He didn't know that she had been fighting her own people for 11 years to keep humanity alive. He didn't know that she was lonely in a way that even a queen surrounded by millions could be lonely. He didn't know that one simple, honest choice was about to change the future of 2 entire civilizations. All he knew was what Danny had told him. Don't kneel. He straightened his back, set his jaw, and walked forward into the light.